Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters here in New York State, one of the civic partners for our show. Today, my guest is Krista Hesdorfer. She's the Director of Public Affairs for Hunger Solutions New York, a nonprofit organization dealing with food insecurity issues across our state. Krista, welcome to North Country Matters. According to New York State Comptroller Thomas DiNapoli, more than 1 in 9 households in New York State was unable to get enough food at some point, being 2020 and 2022, because they lacked either money or other resources. This is a fundamental problem people continue to face in what is considered to be the richest country in the world. I'm very glad you're with us today to talk about Hunger Solutions and how it is helping to address this need.
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me and for covering this important issue. You're exactly right. Food insecurity is on the rise in New York State. It's unacceptable and it's solvable. So I'm happy to have a chance to talk with you today.
Oh, I'm glad you're here. So, Krista, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be doing this work and at Hunger Solutions, and how your organization came to also into being to start doing this work.
Sure. So I came to this work as somebody like so many of us who benefited from a range of public investments and public programs that set me up for success, from WIC and Head Start in those early years all the way up to Pell Grants for college and beyond. So it's always been deeply important to me to be part of not only maintaining, but building on and strengthening the public safety net so all people have the resources they need, including, of course, most basic need of food. So I was really pleased to find Hunger Solutions New York, an organization that really shares that mission. For those who aren't familiar, Hunger Solutions New York is a statewide nonprofit organization. We're dedicated to alleviating hunger for all New Yorkers. And we have a particular focus on federal nutrition assistance programs, our nation's largest and most effective anti-hunger programs. These are programs like SNAP, WIC, school meals, summer meals, the Child and Adult Care Food Program, programs that have scale and sustainability and can really address the issues that we're talking about today. This organization has been around for almost 40 years now and has really been a leader in anti-hunger work, from outreach to policy advocacy over many decades. We were originally founded as a SNAP outreach organization, and that's something that we've certainly maintained and built upon over many years. But now, as you've heard, we've expanded to cover other federal nutrition programs, especially programs for children and families with children. So looking forward to continuing to grow in that work. And of course, like many nonprofits, we would love to work ourselves out of a job. But unfortunately, we're seeing that there's still rising food insecurity across New York State and the country.
Thank you. And I think your personal story is so important, because as someone who benefited from these programs, that it illustrates just how important these programs are to help people get out of the situation they're in and then be able to be contributing members of society. And oftentimes people have a feeling that the helping programs don't really help people achieve independence. And that's not true, is it?
That's not true. And I also think there's misperceptions about who may be eligible for programs like WIC, for programs like school meals. The income guidelines are higher than some folks think. And for many of these programs, there's actually different income guidelines for families who have income from a job, for example, or who have childcare costs that affect their household budgets. So I hope that people will keep an open mind about their own potential eligibility for these programs and realize that they're here to help folks meet their basic needs, get where they need to go. And they're really effective at doing that.
I'm glad to hear you mention childcare costs, because that is an issue that we've done on this show before. And people who don't have young families don't realize just how costly it is to try to put a child in childcare. And in fact, it often costs more in a year than it costs to go to a SUNY school, which is a startling statistic for people who are not in the middle of that problem. But we'll leave that for another day. So let's talk a little bit, first of all, about how pervasive the problem of food insufficiency is in New York State. Define for us how and when a family is considered food insecure.
Sure. So food security is generally defined as having consistent access to enough safe, nutritionally adequate food to live a healthy, active life. So there's different metrics for measuring food insecurity, but in general, they involve asking a household questions like, in the last 12 months, did you ever run out of food and not have money to replace it? Or did you have to skip meals or cut down on the size of a meal because you didn't have enough money for food? And based on how many of those indicators a family answers yes to, they are then considered having experienced food insecurity in that period of time. And what we find is that across multiple measures of food insecurity that vary a little bit, we've got reports from USDA, Feeding America, and now, of course, the State Comptroller's Office, as you mentioned. The findings are consistent and they are alarming. It's clear across all of these measures that food insecurity is rising in New York. Across all of those measures, we're looking at about 1 in 10 New York households struggling with food insecurity, and about 1 in 5 children in our state struggling with food insecurity. That is, of course, distressing. It's unacceptable, but it's probably not shocking to a lot of people. Food prices are up, housing costs are up, incomes haven't kept up. And of course, these pandemic era programs have now sunset. So we're really seeing the natural result of all of those pieces coming together. And that's that families are struggling to meet their basic needs.
And one of the things we should remind folks is that we're talking about households, not individuals. So if a household doesn't have enough food, that can often involve several people who are actually members of that household. So you can't just use the 1 in 10 number and think you're talking about 1 in 10 people, because it's many more people than that are involved, isn't it?
Yes, and it affects communities and households in different ways. This is not a problem that affects all people or all households equally. We know that there's a disproportionate impact on households with children in particular, and on households of color. Nationally, the rate of food insecurity for Black and Hispanic households has been twice as high as the rate of food insecurity among white households. So that's an important nuance to note as well.
Yeah, and I just did a program last week with our local Office of the Aging director, and she pointed out that many senior households, the choices between food and medication because of those kinds of constraints. So it's a very broad problem, and it affects people all across every demographic. So it's important that we have these conversations. So in many ways, hunger is an invisible problem in many communities. It cuts across, as we say, geography, community type, and age. It certainly predated the COVID emergency, and it's gotten worse now that all of those COVID emergency programs have closed. So your organization, Hunger Solutions New York, works at a number of different levels. Talk to us a little bit about the federal nutrition programs, how you can help communities maximize access and participation.
Right. So we work across multiple federal nutrition programs, as I mentioned earlier. That includes programs that individuals or families can participate in, like SNAP or WIC. But we also work on programs like school meals, free summer meals for kids, a child and adult care food program, those types of federal programs that some type of institution or community-based organization or school needs to opt into and choose to provide meals for the kids in their care. All of those programs are undertapped in New York State. There are many more families who could benefit, but they're not connected with the program for a variety of reasons. Some people just don't know about the programs that are available to them. Some people may have general awareness, but they assume that they don't qualify, or they don't realize that they might be able to participate. Some folks attempt to apply and they hit a barrier in the process. And still other folks may be struggling with food insecurity, but they don't qualify for the program. They might be just over the income guideline, or they can't meet some other eligibility criteria that limits access. So our work at Hunger Solutions New York tries to address all of those issues. A lot of our work is focused on outreach, raising awareness of the programs. So for SNAP, we run a statewide network of SNAP outreach and assistance coordinators who are housed in local community-based organizations. They conduct outreach in their community. They provide free confidential pre-screenings so folks can find out if they're potentially eligible for SNAP. And then they can walk people through the entire application process, including gathering their documents and addressing any barriers that might come up in the process. For WIC, we also focus a lot of our work on raising awareness and particularly making sure that people know about some recent improvements in the WIC program. So for example, there's no more paper checks in WIC. The benefits are now distributed on an EBT card that looks just like a debit card, and folks can use those benefits at their convenience throughout the month rather than having to buy everything all in one trip. There's even an app for WIC now that makes it a lot easier to shop and check your balance. And there's also been a substantial increase in WIC benefits for fruits and vegetables. So it's just even more reason to participate. So we spend a lot of time making sure that community partners and families, of course, know about these improvements. They know about WIC. And we also work to establish referral systems so that if a family is accessing other programs and services in their community, they are seamlessly connected with WIC benefits as well. I mentioned earlier the programs that require some action on behalf of an institution, whether that's a school or a child care center. And for those programs, we again conduct outreach, but we also provide one-on-one technical assistance to help school administrators or child care providers, whoever it may be, maximize their participation in that program, make sure they're reaching as many kids as possible. And of course, you know, we'll talk more about this, but across all of the federal nutrition programs, our work also involves advocacy at the state and local levels, at the federal level, and also administrative advocacy with public agencies to make sure that these programs are reaching as many people as possible.
Okay, thanks. So we're going to talk a little bit more about making sure that children are getting enough to eat. And Tom DiNapoli's office just today came out with another report saying that child poverty in New York State is extremely high. We rank 41st on the list, and that's not a good number to be that high. So the school lunch and breakfast program has been in place for many years, but it has not always reached the children who need the help. Individual schools have begun to break down those barriers by participating by opening the program to every child, not just to those below a certain income level. So let's talk about how Hunger Solutions works at that level to encourage schools to make sure that every child can participate without fear of being seen as, you know, someone who needs help, because you do need help, but it also is a stigma, isn't it?
You're exactly right. So school meal programs are highly effective. They reduce hunger, they improve children's mental and physical health, and they support learning. But there are gaps in access. As I mentioned earlier, as we've been talking about, there were all these pandemic era supports that have now sunset. One of those is that during the pandemic, Congress enabled schools to provide meals at no cost to all students without application. That was a huge success, and it helped to mitigate an anticipated spike in hunger, and child hunger specifically during the pandemic. Unfortunately, Congress let that flexibility expire, and all of a sudden, from one school year to the next, 720,000 kids in New York State lost access to free school meals. And now we're back to this system where children need to apply and be, you know, either pay for their meals, have a reduced price meal, right? That original sort of tiered payment system that can be so stigmatizing and puts up barriers to access for school meals. So following that loss, we began a coalition called the Healthy School Meals for All New York Kids Coalition. We co-lead that with our partners at Community Food Advocates. And we now have more than 290 organizations on board, all advocating toward a common goal. We are asking New York State to step in and make sure that every student in our state has access to a school breakfast and lunch without barriers, whether that barrier is cost, the paperwork of completing an application, or the stigma that you discussed earlier. That coalition has had some successes. We began our advocacy in earnest in last year's budget cycle, and in the 2024 budget, we secured, with the help of our legislative champions, $134.6 million to expand access to free school meals. That allowed 1,200 schools across the state to newly serve free meals to all of their students without application. And that meant that 347,000 kids across the state gained access to free school meals this year. We're now starting to see the impact of that. We just found out this week that school meal participation has increased 12% over the last 6 months, which, to give you a sense of scale, is 18 million school lunches that have been gained because of that state investment. But our work isn't done, and that's part of why we're here today, right? There's still a gap here. You know, unfortunately, New York has not established a truly universal school meal model yet. And so because of that, there's 320,000 kids who remain without access to free school meals in our state. 8 other states, including our neighbors in Massachusetts and Vermont, have already done this. And we really feel that New York can and must be next. So we're continuing that advocacy as we're looking already to next year's state budget. And if anybody's interested in joining us in that call, we have a campaign website, schoolmealsforallny.org, and would love to have you.
I will be sure to put those links in our show notes so that people can follow along with this. So there's another federal nutrition program that's new this year, the Summer EBT for Children, which is starting. What do we know about the rollout for that, and who will benefit?
Sure. So we know that child hunger is especially pervasive during the summer when kids lose access to those school meals. And so Congress has created this brand new program, Summer EBT. It's intended to help fill that gap. Through this program, starting this summer, families with eligible children will receive $40 a month, or $120 per the whole summer, per eligible child. And then that $120 is in EBT food benefits, similar to SNAP. It's a separate program, but similar concept. Families can use those EBT benefits to buy food at grocery stores, farmers markets, and other participating retailers. Most families who are eligible for this program will receive those benefits automatically. So if that household participates in SNAP, if they receive free school meals automatically through another means-tested program, or if they've submitted an application to their school for free school meals and were certified that way, those kids will all receive summer EBT benefits automatically and seamlessly. But families who are eligible for summer EBT who haven't already tapped into one of those other programs will need to submit an online application or paper application. That's not available quite yet. The state is rolling out this program in real time, but we do expect that there will be an application up in early July, and would encourage folks to visit our website. I'll give you the link for that program as well, and stay up to date. You know, make sure you're subscribed to our emails so that you receive the latest information about summer EBT as it rolls out in our state.
Well, that is going to make a big difference for a lot of folks during the summer, because when school isn't in session, hunger becomes even more of an issue for folks. So even though people may have gardens, there's farmers markets and things like that, you still have to have the wherewithal in order to take advantage of those programs. So this sounds like a really, really good program as soon as you can get it up and running. So another critical piece of the federal picture is the Farm Bill, and it's already overdue for reauthorization by Congress. Can you tell us what the status on that is and how that will affect some of these programs that you're talking about?
Absolutely. So for folks who aren't familiar, the Farm Bill is the federal legislative package that authorizes spending for programs like SNAP, summer EBT, senior farmers market nutrition programs, and other nutrition programs. And of course, it also includes things like farm subsidies and conservation policies as well. As you mentioned, that Farm Bill is overdue. We are starting to see some movement. It doesn't seem like we're going to have a Farm Bill this year, but we are seeing proposals being brought forward to take a position on certain issues. So right now we have proposals set forth in both the House and the Senate. There is a proposal from Senator Stabenow that has a lot of really amazing improvements to SNAP and other nutrition programs. But unfortunately, there's a House proposal as well by House Agriculture Committee Chairman G.T. Thompson, and that proposal includes a $30 billion cut to SNAP benefits over the next decade. What it does is change the ability for USDA to update a calculation. It's called the Thrifty Food Plan that is used to set benefit amounts for SNAP and some other nutrition programs that we care deeply about. And if USDA loses the ability to update that Thrifty Food Plan, it means that SNAP benefits are no longer going to be keeping up with things like changes in food preparation, in changes in food costs. So we're ultimately seeing a cut of, again, about $30 billion over the next decade, which is, of course, coming out of the pockets of folks who are really already struggling to make ends meet to get through the end of the month and not run out of money for food. So that is happening right now. There's going to be a markup on that Farm Bill proposal next week on May 23rd. And so we're really hoping that if folks share our concerns about this, that they will reach out to their federal representatives and urge them to oppose the proposal and to stand firm against any cuts or harmful changes to SNAP and other critical federal nutrition programs.
And as we know, 2024 is a federal election year, so all of our representatives and a third of the Senate will be up for re-election. And this is a great topic to bring up during any kind of a meeting that those folks might be having when they're trying to convince us to re-elect them. We need to make them realize that they've got to do some work for us in order to to get our vote. So I think that it's a good thing that you've reminded us that the Farm Bill is a key piece of legislation that affects everyone across the board. So, Krista, what happens when people, kids, adults, and seniors don't have access to the food they need? Too much of rural New York is a food desert where there are no full-service grocery stores in far too many communities. And in fact, for a lot of communities, the only access to food might be at a gas station. And we know that won't include high nutrition fruits and vegetables, fresh food, or anything like that. So what are the health and wellness outcomes for people with limited transportation, limited income, and too few choices?
Yeah, well, all of the things that you mentioned contribute to and intersect with food insecurity. And the research is clear that food insecurity is incredibly damaging to people across all age groups. For children, we see outcomes like overall poor health status, low birth weight for infants, iron deficiency anemia, asthma, and a whole range of mental and physical health problems. For adults, research has shown connections between food insecurity and increased risk of diabetes, hypertension, pregnancy complications, and even mental health outcomes like depression. For older adults, you mentioned earlier this tension of, do I buy food or do I pay for my medication? That has real impacts. Again, things like diabetes, depression, but also heart failure and hypertension, lower cognitive function, all of these really distressing and in some cases preventable health outcomes that are unacceptable. And so we really need to make sure that folks have the resources that they need to care for their health and to be able to live that healthy, active life that we've talked about.
Right. So one of the things that we know the local communities can do and have done on a routine basis is create local solutions, whether it's a school backpack program to make sure that food is going home on the weekends for kids, or for example, colleges have put in place college food banks, and there's a whole range of things that people have done locally to try to address this issue. But what can people do on a larger basis to come up with policy solutions at the state and federal level that will really make a true difference in their community for their friends and neighbors and themselves?
Well, even at the local level, there's work to be done. And we hope that the folks who are running those food pantries, running those backpack programs will also conduct outreach for federal nutrition programs, because we know that those local programs, emergency food resources, can't keep up with the need. And so, you know, if you're handing a family a backpack, or you're handing a family maybe 3 days worth of food, also make sure that they're getting information about how to apply for SNAP, how to apply for WIC, where they can find free summer meals in their community. And that way they're tapping into those sustainable federal funding sources. At the state and local level, we hope folks will join us in our advocacy. At the state level, we're focused on policy solutions like, of course, free school meals for all, as we've talked about, but also increasing funding for SNAP outreach, and also focusing on emergency food programs like Nourish New York and HIPNAP that help those local solutions to meet as much of the demand as possible. We're also working in coordination with other organizations to encourage New York State to supplement the minimum SNAP benefit and make that more adequate for folks. So there's a lot of good work that's happening on the state level, especially during the state budget process. And we hope folks will stay connected with us on that. At the federal level is where you can really make some changes in these programs. They're federal programs. And so ultimately Congress is where you would make the most substantial improvements and investments. So we hope that people will stay connected with us as Farm Bill potentially moves forward. And also child nutrition bill is something that we're paying close attention to. We know that that is well overdue as well, but we continue to talk with our representatives about priorities for expanding the reach of child nutrition programs so that they're prepared to stand in defense of those programs and hopefully actually work to build and improve them on behalf of all New Yorkers when those bills begin to move. But for all of those types of policy work, I would encourage folks to visit our website, hungersolutionsny.org. We have a spot right on the homepage where you can subscribe to advocacy alerts. You can also follow us on social media, and we're sure to always share when these advocacy opportunities arise, exactly how you can get involved, what the messaging is. We try to make it as easy as possible for people to get involved and engaged in these efforts.
Well, I appreciate everything that Hunger Solutions is doing and all the programs that you've talked about. Increasing participation and making sure there are no barriers to access is a huge step forward if we can make it happen. And obviously you folks have been doing this work for nearly 40 years, so you know how to make it happen. And you know, a lot of very good-hearted people would just need a little bit of help about how to become better advocates and to know when and who to contact. So obviously you have your organization has figured out all those pieces. So we'll hope that we can put people in touch with you and with it and make sure that some of these things happen. I so appreciate you coming in today. These news stories that we read, it seems like every day about here in New York that someone's in need, and yet we know these programs work if people can take advantage of them and get access to them. So thanks again for coming in, and thank you for having taking the time to talk about this with us, and we will do our part by making sure people know how to connect with you.
That's wonderful. Thank you again for having me and for covering this, and I do hope people will reach out.
Yeah, it was it's my pleasure, and I always appreciate the time that people donate when it comes to this, because the only way we're going to solve these problems is by people rolling up their sleeves and helping out. So this is a great opportunity to do that on an issue that is absolutely of fundamental importance to all of us. So Krista, thank you very much. These conversations are a production of North Country Matters. This show is a civic collaboration between the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County and the Potsdam Public Library. Until next time, remember, our North Country matters.